所有过来trái đối miệng thái miệng nói ngồi suy của ra vai đàn siêu địa ba đồ miệng nói địa ba jo thái do ji nhẹ sa bê Tiên đàn rồi hoàng quyên lại khai biển đàn Thiên bó ra chia dự lối sang trái bó yê Tiên biển nhiên bó riêng đô sai chê Miệng miệng dễ viên Tế đời chê chê rê dễ Thế miệng chê bè Hoàng bố chá bè yang Thế vô ma luyện chôn dễ sang viên đà Hãy chê kê Hãy 家主希望的美的。天宝主席配送所有年大学的。哎呦，啥些别你就一面都照。Just wants to remind every one of ourselves here to take a moment and cultivate the highest form of motivation. We call it bodhicitta motivation or the altruistic motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And with that kind of motivation, we should all participate in this Lamrim discourse, discourse on the stages of the path to enlightenment by Manjushri Lama Tsongkhapa. Allow me to read about a page or two from the great Lamrim Chemo, the great treatise on the stage of path to enlightenment, volume number 3 in the English translation, page 298, to give you the blessing of lineage oral transmission followed by explication.
到就说没得别事，这样就把连多不等也是这不得大别些子小，蹦蹦做多少一呢？连起把不觉得就把咱这里的送就蹦蹦人的，他给你我浪上这边的边的蹦蹦啊，个你我浪小就个。这都不能错把样，你我这就是个别说了错把大给大，新鲜他们一般是上班的不不均那样的。这都如果把事了给对他们一讲别人那新的朋友都说行了说吧，那么这边是。也别把建议，你把那把现在就把现在说了说吧，说别也别切把这，也别切把完了，那就说个娘。我那也那首先可能那也别那个一个说吧的那他现在对外面把决定就把那也现在首先那也现在起来的，他你就。什么说呢？当人就没得可去的了，也有么也些子的。那现在人现在那不对控制呀，你把它对的，嘛你控制样没把它对的呢。老个人拉的呢，都把他的到讲，不都把这个他的老师为啥？现在都不控制没把他越讲，我讲啊，不老的呢都把你。这边是第一，你别动的那是那多数吧，这把也弄西巴的了，点那考察也没得别些，现在也没动了，意思。到这么就没到，不知道什么的呗，也不怎么的呗，这些的吧，也不知老百姓吧，都说了，就没啥说吧，让个小细节东西的。说的那也就没得呗，你来，那你们什么的呗，这要什么了，俺们你没同样有了。那么了，前面这边都也给把没都把什么的走路呢，弄完这把的，都把那边老年了点。啊，老爷了的那边这边那么就没到那个弄没给媳妇同啊的，弄完的也这到了没吧也。媳妇给把那点呢，到了的弄完的就慢慢准备弄完给把叫我先走。看啥了？啥吧？他呢？别写吧了，牛都没把弄完的，第二张我这边上写就等把这写节，给把写节，给把你了带呢。看啥的？怎么看啥的？就么到不是怎么那边弄完给把的弄完让给把写完了。对了，那月我这些就没着了，让些到不到，但也别谁没这边让些没别吹，这个西巴的说也把这别他就把老牛个别就现在天那说就没现在杀的，就没现在杀的就没得那，这他把这别他你别老安给，用别地几别他了。别没个别的那张些没这这边忙的些那边那些地面开过来的，把我找不见那边电脑弄完下完了，电脑就没得不下完音的，就没得不当我罗嗦的了吧，这没得这边些弄完了要接个手机呗，就那把接不上这边当把。东北了，那个代表东西的，天让些东西让些就那说就那下完了就没得别东西就我就害怕那送我这些的是超过人的就说的，就叫了就把我那样，我的对他让些也没有这边别那不接呢，让些搞了。听一辈子声把这现在的老师傅就没得个啥了，那的就没这个啥，那我的硬呢，他说笑，当群众的这个，可是咱们这里话的这东西的，这他的引导了，他们的俺的了，咱们这些的啥呢？就对了，什么地就等到。什么地错他们那这个就年时的长大，错他们送我的开始的，现在是他们爱要的，那地那你的爱好要的，现在了错这么多错别业的，可头发起来要么考试，那也没头发起来冲过了啊。 다데 그렇죠. 덴바시 편지 때문에 초 있어. 그래가 가서 풍부된 데마다 풍부 가서 때와 가서 풍부 때와 섬.
네. 간디스게 풍부 강사를 때문에 강사 풍부를
저
때문에.
인세
아니.
이거 강사 풍부된 데마. 강사
아,
풍부가
레티아바다 이 덴바스로.
덴바다 편지 때문에 초 있어도. 데 디솜디 다 그래서 다들 나만이 에직 다들 리바티 캅번 맞아야 인스고.
So Geshe read from page 298 to 301 to give us the blessing of lineage oral transmission of the loving Chemo. And now we are back to page 298. And so we will pick up from the subpoint C. Those of you who have the text or those who are using electronic version, the subpoint C reads, how those arguments also refute each of the remaining positions. Okay. So how did we get here? Remember that we talked about how sevenfold chariot analysis could be applied to the actual meaning, how does a person exist or the self exist, isn't it? So just like we analyze a chariot in 7 different ways, and we come to see that a chariot does not exist in and of itself intrinsically, in the same way, by applying the same analysis, we will come to understand how self or person does not exist intrinsically. And so what we have already talked about so far is that how self could not be identical with aggregates of a person, conventionally even speaking, right? And how self cannot be intrinsically different from aggregates of a person. We have already went through the fallacies, that is related to each of those positions. If self were to be identical with the aggregates conventionally, well, there's a lot of issues come up. We talked about that. And if self were to be, or the person were to be, intrinsically distinctive and different from his or her aggregates, we got a bunch of other fallacies and problems. We talked about that. So those two analyses, right, self as being same as the aggregates or as being different from the aggregates, right, those are two analyses we have already done with. So the remaining positions means the remaining 5, if you will, right? And as Geshe said, that it's relatively speaking, it's easy to see how collection of aggregate is not the self, just like the collection of all the parts of a chariot is not the chariot, or that the shape of a chariot is not the chariot, and the form of a person is not the person, right? Those are a little easier to deal with, okay? But where we might find a little harder, so to speak, relatively, everything is relative, is the other 3 positions, which is how self is not intrinsically dependent upon the aggregates, and how aggregates are not intrinsically dependent upon the self or the person. That's 2. And how person or self does not intrinsically possess a form or the aggregates. Right? That's 3. Okay, so 3 plus 2, 5. So 5 remaining positions we will deal with.
어때 다 가르침이라. 디스보소로 주저와네 제다다 누지 돈다 그래서 거제 나분이 찍이나 애네 강사다 뭐 풍부선 다들 되고 말이 애네 돼서 그래. 다들 되면 찍으려고 또 다른 시 집에 다들 있는 엔 데메 통신비 가서 돼서 그래. 로션나 신 데메 통신이고 대당시다 되고 말이지. 어다 디직 다들 리관인지로 어때 자는다 그런데 막 인도야 인수로.
So as we talked about this already, that if a self were to be identical with, same as, one with aggregates of a person, then the self and person could not be talked about as if they are different, distinctive, right? Then whatever happens to the aggregate, so should happen to the self. And we have gone through that. That's not working. And if self were to be intrinsically distinctive and separate from, different from the aggregates, then self or a person and his or her aggregates have nothing to do with each other. They should not have any kind of dependency relationship or dependent, right? Because they are just, intrinsic in their own rights. Who needs who, so to speak. So we have already went through those what called problems or the issues. We have dealt with that.
that's because kick but you are them and Rashi Tadi Karshun show you what there. Pumbo dal pumbo ten be say ten ye be ten be show in yobales. Or this is what Kansa Latin pumbo here, pumbo did Kansa Tayasanda. Or did that Karshun show you what there say I did the Mutadi Judek theatre. That's what. Kargnos는熊바 생구熊바를 다자熊바 여대요.熊바 너지 쉐버熊바 쓰기라.熊증을 타와 쓰기라. 더 품보 다다 달 품보 때는 예베 때데 쇼니 여발레서 왔다 품보 바달 때 아직세 다들 카르존데 야슈데 야슈데 니 카르존데 거 작사 쇼세데 야슈바 쇼데 카르존데 카르존데 야기 텔 쇼데 거 어디 쇼니세 여발 런시 신데 메베스 때도 때비 때벌 메바니 힘다리 쉐바 쉐노스 다디야 这个时候，他过点点吧，有阵他可以点点吧写的，你这一呢点点吧这个嘛是吧？他让些这边他的呢，这边同学这个他点点吧小头嘛是吧？我觉得现在点点吧没有，你听到了写我写的，我的他都写不写。如果来讲，碰不到有嘛大了呀，碰不天路也没看见的，现在呢大问题就呢。 신이 디메데 데도보 셰소스 어디다 공디레샤 근데 거기 풍부 나요만 달 풍부 요바 풍부 나요마서 때때부터 되게라 어디 현도 요 말이스랑 이게 다들 요 말이스라 신이 데도보 셰소 나도 풍부 데베초 양 신달의 셰거든 제 되게 셰어샤지스라 다 두부시도 다 대풍보다 대마서 그러 풍보다도 내가 쓰고 말아 대마 지금 시험 말아 나 풍보다 대마 쓰고라 어디 나풍 힘다 연라도 대마 지고 되고 다 근데 나 풍보다 대마다 힘다 연라도 대마 써야 돼 지고 써서 인데도 힘다 연라 대마도 나 힘 좀나 되고 다 가지 대마 쓰던 데서라 거기 가자 라이 접선은 는 대바스들은 타디 남샤자 되면 봐.
된다 된지 용서로나.
어디서도 어디를 받지 자야레스. 시바차데 티니레 단 숭데마이 민데 컨진다 유메티 데는 조아미 현은 능된 시민 수데는 단 수디니 시민이 제소 능된 리지 발응던데 뭐 다들이야 리지 발언데 와서는 못하던 데야 되시. 다 숭대는 리지 소던데 와서 무지베 돼야 되라. 그건지 담바들 무지베 되다 못하던 데지니야 그랬어.
알로서.
어디 여다 뒤에 가야지는.
변하게 대진 가서는 양주소로 된수니 되게.
라.
대진 뭐치도 된수디?
무지인데 리지 소던데 봐.
라. 소다가 레진 소되는 말로스.
레진 소다. 자 쓰지 나더라서는 고수 심제는 쓰기로. 다 심제다 레진이
알로.
무지베 더요 말아. 저다 무지베 더다 무타디 더 인셔다.
So we are back to page 298, volume number 3, the English translation, Lamrim Chemo, in the middle of the page, under the caption, how those arguments also refute each of the remaining positions. And as Geshe explained, with the example given there, when we think of yogurt in a container or a bowl, right? Yogurt is dependent upon the bowl because it's inside the bowl, right? And the bowl is also dependent upon the yogurt. It's a yogurt container. So there is that dependent relationship between the two. But yet they are distinctive, isn't it? Yogurt is not the bowl and bowl is not the yogurt. Okay? So in the same way, self or a person and his or her aggregates are dependent in the same way. self of a person is dependent upon his or her psychosomatic aggregates or skandhas, and his or her aggregates, the skandhas, are dependent also upon self or the person. But they are distinctive as well. Self is not the aggregates, aggregates are not the self. See that? So that's how it works out, you know. If self and aggregates were to be intrinsically connected or related or dependent, let's say, which is impossible, yeah, then we cannot really talk about the dependent concept here, right? If self is intrinsically one with aggregates, then we can talk about what depends on what, right? What is that which depends on what? Because they are identically one. But if self is intrinsically different from the aggregates, that too cannot have any dependent relationship because each of them can withstand on its own. There's no need for the other, isn't it? So we cannot assert the concept of pratit-samutpad or dependent arising in the context of intrinsic reality. Okay? Self either would have to be identical with aggregates, which means seven aggregates are one. So we cannot talk about. For dependent, we have to have two things, right? This is dependent on that, and that dependent on this, right? If this is one, what is dependent on what? This is just one, you know? So that's the issue we're talking about. But then if self is intrinsically different from the aggregates, well then, it is like we're talking about, blue and green, two colors. I mean, blue is not green, green is not blue. They're very distinctive different, right? It has to be like that. And then the other issue we talked about is how self has or possesses aggregates, isn't it? It's kind of, we can't talk about aggregates possess self, right? A person has form, body, right? Aggregates. We can't say aggregates have a person, right? That is not working. So a person has aggregates, okay? Possesses aggregates. So again, there's a dependent relationship. Person is a possessor. I know in English it's not elegant, so excuse my elegance here. Aggregate is what is possessed by the person. Looks like the person is a possessive. So possessor and possession, they are distinct dependent relationship, isn't it? So in terms of that kind of relationship where we said, if two things have that kind of a possessor-possession relationship, just work with me this English word, okay? It's not elegant, but who cares here? We are with the meaning now. Then we can say, there's two ways we can think about it. One way is a person has aggregates, or the form, for example, but the form and the person have the same ngo, means same nature, isn't it? But if we say a person has or owns or possesses domestic animals, well, that kind of a possessor-possession relationship is different, isn't it? A person is the owner of the domestic animals. So domestic animals are different from the person, isn't it? I mean, they don't have the same nature, right? If, you allow me to use example here, more distinct, like, you are a cat lover or dog lover or whatever, So you own a dog. You possess a dog or a cat. That's what we're talking about. But the cat is not you. The dog is not you. You and dog and cat are different, isn't it? Right? But your body and you are of the same nature. That's your body, right? So there could be those two types of what we call different variations of possessor and possession relationship.
In the Rangin Tribe Guji, the Rangin Tribe Guji in a Tade de Michi, Tangi, Hindas Jibara.
No.
Tade in the limit on Ye citizen that the Pinsitoya and Deba Yomarwa, or the Yomar is
No.
30 years down the Pumbo, the words of dying and Yana Te Amirete, Pumbo then Darden Dog Sumbina. The heat dogs you the Mirumichers, or the Tana, Sosum de Pumbo Sosum Tata. Pinzite between the Debatia Dama and Sosum dying in the Carriorasena. Take Maris. Carison, Pedro Carasena. The hit dogs you so Medevi Sheros. The hit dogs the Nimena, check that dogs say Marwa. Take Maris.
So we're on top of page 299. What we just talked about is how person possesses aggregate or has aggregates, but both of them are dependent upon each other. Of course, not intrinsically, because in the context of intrinsic reality, we cannot talk about dependent relationship or arising. Okay, so if person were to be identical with the aggregates, then the person and aggregate as one and the same thing. So we can talk about person as possessing aggregates, because person is aggregates, right? You see that. But if person or self is intrinsically different from the aggregates, then person and aggregates have to be unrelated phenomena, if you will, because they shouldn't have anything to do with each other, because they don't need each other, So those are the issues we talked about. And then the other issue is, what about the collection of aggregates? Somebody will say, well, that is the person, right? Person is nothing but the mere collection of the psychosomatic aggregates. Okay? Again, as we said, that collection cannot be the self or the person. Okay? Just like we can say the collection of the parts of all the chariots together is not the chariot, right?
Dole pumbo deni isum ba tiji pumbo du da ma isa di da kong di she zo she ya pumbo so zo da ina le chi ba bu ji le dang she ba bu ji di ju she se ro da pumbo so do de ka de zena da da lang lang sha de re leng ge de ma ba o te me za ta ko leng ge di san ta ko lang ja de leng ge ni ga chi re do ro o ti she o te ma ju ba za de le song de se pumbo re ne da ki nyawa lang zara debi nu pumbo nga nyawa lang sho dego la te tanga pumbo na soba nyawa lang sho gyurge bi sho se ta je da pumbo so ya khangsa da hi me pumbo re da hi me song sha se de te za khangsa lang ja de go ro se te nu pumbo soba de lang ja de lenge ning ga de ro so de te ma ro ko lang ja de lenge de ma ro
No. So we're still on the page 299. A part of that conversation or the discussion here is that a mere collection of the psychosomatic aggregates of a person is not the person or the self. Why? Because self or person is imputed onto the collection of aggregates. The collection of aggregates constitute the basis for labeling or imputation, isn't it? Person is what's imputed onto that. So what is imputed onto something and the basis for that imputation, they are not identical, right? They're not one and the same thing, isn't it? And we still insist that the collection of aggregate is the person, then how do you distinguish between what is imputed and what's imputed onto, right? Because we can't talk about, right, something being imputed onto something when the phenomenon is just single, only one, right? So that's the kind of a concept that has been raised. And also, as referring to sutras where, that statement we said that person is the agent, right, who acquires aggregates. So aggregates are something obtained or acquired by a person or the self, isn't it? And the self of the person is my new word, acquirer of those aggregates. See, good to make some new words here. So, so if person and aggregates were to be the same, if we say that mere collection of aggregates is the person, then we almost have to say the aggregates acquire itself, right? That makes no sense, isn't it? Because then aggregates becomes the agent as well. Agent and agency cannot be one and the same thing.
De garza soba da hi yin da ma so man di pung bu yun la ya de da de go se lo de da pung bu so zun de da ma la ya de ge kar ka go de di shu de wo de la en de pung bu yun da kang sa de da de je da en pung bu yun kang sa yi se pung bu so zun yi se na vi da yin se yin da wo da ka ni de zu ma ba je ro ba di no de da the Pumbo Sotum de Dahir Mado, Taju Maris Lazine, and the Pumbo Junta Dahire Mado, Taju Rima, Conjivareta, Casa Lanzareta, what the Ripati here would resort.
No, sure. So once we kind of, how should I say, assert that the mere collection of psychosomatic aggregates of a person is not a person or the self, because that constitutes the basis for the person, labeling. Person or self is what is labeled, imputed onto it. Okay? Then it is also easier for us to understand how continuum of aggregates is not a person as well. Because continuity or continuum of aggregates is also the basis for imputation or labeling. It's not the imputed phenomenon as well. Okay? Because why we really, kind of talk about all these things, because there are many different assertions about, what self is. Some say, well, self is nothing but the collection of the aggregates, isn't it? Others say, you know what? No. Self is nothing but the continuity of the aggregate. Then some are saying, no. Self is the consciousness aggregate alone, not others. Right? So people come with all these different viewpoints to pinpoint as if there has to be something to be found as self, isn't it? Yeah.
What say, Lord said, Keda mind jump and 新的朋友老师为朋友所行老师问能这个在也切不见也切不你问呢新的就不行的所了说不错别也切不吧到的都个样呢我那也呢首先看到的也为是什么说吧了到晓得没吧觉得就把也是能首先来些就是在一个移民就 Simso so then German the Kajita lawyer here so started in the yep Kabaji is na in the this word and the Pumunga in the Kansa Dahira Namji Puma Digipu Soatu Kansa Dahira and Konzo Tabu Kansa the Leo Yomar was Yomar Shiva or any Subject the thought that the Navita was Pumba Euro, the your Kansa Euro was. Yes, they had Sujan Kona, Kansa said Damidi, Gangal Taya Yungajiro, or Jedi Tiredo, those, but did Ria Oman Jubak Tiredo. Yes, Sujan Layo, yes, Kevin said, yes, Sujan Mato, your Marcetta, and Pumba Shenda, that's Pumba and Subunji Omo Shendadi.
So we are in the middle of page 299. So where we just talked about how a mere collection of psychosomatic aggregate skandhas could not be the self of a person. Okay? But then, some might point out, what? No, what we really mean is that special form that takes, right, of a person, that is a person, isn't it? Okay? Not a mere collection, but it's that distinctive form, what the person looks like kind of thing, right? Well, we got a problem with that too. Okay? As Geshe explained, that a person is that distinctive form of a person, okay? Form has to be something visible, isn't it? Okay? So then among the 5 aggregates, only the aggregate form has a form, something visible. The remaining 4 aggregates have no form, right? Feelings have no form. Discriminated awareness has no form, while consciousness definitely has no form. Non-compositional factor has no form. So that means that all those 4 aggregates have nothing to do with the person, right? If you insist that person refers to that form of a person, so then we can only talk about a visible things which has a form, because consciousness and perceptions don't have a form. Okay? So are you saying that the aggregate of feelings, aggregate of consciousness, aggregate of discriminative awareness, aggregate of non-compositional factors are not a basis for the person or self, right? That's what we're discussing, When we think of a person or the self, Purusha is the Sanskrit word, Kamsa in Tibetan. Kamsa or person is regarded as what we call a phenomenon that is neither form nor consciousness, isn't it? A self or a person is neither form nor perception or consciousness. Okay? So the collection of aggregates cannot be the person, and the form of a person cannot be the person, because a person or a self is an imputed phenomenon that's neither form nor consciousness. That depends on what is called the demin duje. I think non-compositional factor or something. That don't get me to that word, but I give you the definition of what it is, right? Something that's neither form nor consciousness. That's what a self or person is.
现在在那现代人已经那把顶不得空的没办的，得到那让人拉了点，多把大将碰不的吉他的拉塞贝，让些顶不空的没办的，我就碰不了点多把你这个些，对你别动的这呢，多少送把车把引路是不的，大点着，现在的你看啥你大现在的。可是别人拉进去，可以人拉他妈也你，现在的，那你们的别东西啊的，现在的你人拉大，这他是那把地在那买人那，现在可能要是同时那把如果现在那了，你别个那个国家就刚刚如果我的那些考察的，你碰不到，这他的大把开钱里面呢，你碰不到大把上个，你别来上个是那这，结完那个是那这，我考察那么下的态度我这是。
So at the bottom of page 299, what you find stated there is that the example of a chariot that we are trying to apply to the actual concept of the meaning, self or person, how a person self exists, there are a lot of similarities here, right? That's why we are using that example. Because the chariot example is kind of easier to relate to. Chariot is something that we can see, isn't it? We can dismantle the parts. We know what the axle looks like, what the spokes look like, whatever. We put them together, then what does it look like? Because then we say, well, what is chariot here? Is it the mere collection of all the parts of a chariot? Or is it, every part of the chariot? Or is it something very distinctive from the whole parts of the chariot? What is it, right? We can easily do that kind of analysis because chariot is something visible and we can easily relate to. Once we understand how a chariot does not exist intrinsically, it's dependent upon its parts, okay? But none of its parts is the chariot. But chariot is something that cannot exist on its own without its parts. It has a dependent relationship with the parts, but you cannot simply have the dismantled parts heaped up together as if that's a chariot. That isn't. It has to be pitted in, So all of those things, what makes what chariot is. But then ultimately, what is chariot? But that whole thing we put together, we just simply call it chariot, right? And it functions as a chariot. It is a vehicle. It can carry humans. It can carry luggage. It functions just fine. In the same way, a person or self is simply imputed onto the collection of his or her psychosomatic aggregates. None of the aggregates is the person, just like none of the parts of the chariot is a chariot, none of the aggregates is a person. But then person is, right, dependent upon the aggregate, just like the chariot is dependent upon all of its parts. And so there is not something findable as a person under analysis. It's simply a label onto the aggregates, a collection of aggregates of a person, and that person exists conventionally. That person is the agent who creates good and bad karmas and other kinds of karma. That is the person who experiences the outcomes of the karma. So we can see the kind of correlations or similarities between the chariot example and the status of a person or a self.
Drag shit, you pay don't zen, door sung ba chuba university. Given the da, then dollar sunga lea, that Hong is not so years. Taji the Shiamati, China Tadi, and the Hindal Pedons and the number of Pedons Sunga, dollar sumba Joe Morris, rebel on my 10 of the Tata settings.
Of course, there is a reference in a sutra about the example of a chariot and in all of that, but it's not something just only we found it stated in a sutra. But if we use through the reasoning, right, analytical reasoning, we can come to see that what is talked about, it withstands the reasoning, okay? Because chariot is neither any of its parts, nor is mere collection of its parts. It is dependent upon all of its parts put together. It's just simply an imputed reality onto its basis of imputation. Okay? Through analysis and reasoning, we can investigate and we can understand that, isn't it? It's not something Buddha just said in the sutta, so be it. Like, no. you can reason it, you can analyze it, and you can see it, that's what it is. And the same with the status of the self or the person.
다 시바 틀어든 강사 지모다 추는시 다 틀어든 시야 될 강제 넘버디 제바 셰니 에네 강사 그 다음에 또 어서다 또 사요 줄라 에네 그 로를 주주도 가져 두고 그러시나 에네 지모다 나와서 용거로 어디 용거에서 왔다.
So now we are on page 300 right at the top. Subpoint D reads, how the person appears like an illusion based on that refutation. Okay? So based on that meaning, once we understand well the example of a chariot and the sevenfold analysis, and we apply it exactly to the status of a person or the self, and we analyze the self in 7 different ways. So once we've done that well, and we realize or understand that a person does not exist intrinsically, or person lacks intrinsic existence, that realization, what's the outcome of that realization? Now, what changes have happened? What has transformed is now we will start to see how all things appear like an illusion. Once you have the realization of the selflessness, of the emptiness, of intrinsic reality, things will appear to you or to us, to our mind, as like an illusion.
This is karsa you tati karsa chesan de dong do zang any big namji dong ma do kong yul da da dong do sa ne any big yul da da ni men ra yin sa de la jimata bu start jimata de la tondong karsa tondo demba jimata bu somba ta bu yeba zam de chob jang demba yeba zam de chob ja demba ke ba la sheba tangs o de si wonda da Jima sayati in the Tondo Demba Jimata Sayati Carison Tirisiota. Demba Kibal, Tilla, and Jima Sayajita Zumbeton Shawara. She the Tondo Demba Jimata Sayatel, Kuragaza Kasam to Wormadi, she had Kato, the Shinako Jimata Sharzu Carison, and Demba Ka in the Jimata Siwari, Demba Karawa, the Demba Batica in the Carsa Tessio Mara, Jimas Demba. Jima na ya jima mai jime ta mai to ba chi bara wa
temper night
temper ka ba te jima ta la gres
no so
tin sar karsa jima ta ba yo ba tam di thob ja demba ke ba demba ke ngan zu din yo wa yin sa jo o tin sar ga ngan zu din zu de da ti demba de ta zumba de sa yong da ngan zu ti ko ni re da ti ko ni ma ya zin sa jo o di demba thoba din sa ma Tondo Demba said, Demba Chuba Shago Mara. Demba Chuba de Mare. Name it to say, you Mare. What Muslim Papa Yamsha, any Demba said, Geshe, what to do that? What he made.
Papa Motion will
Yamsha, Demba said, Demba de.
No, so.
She was the so like your mother song, but then Ranshi don't send you. So no. No, Jimata Vinil, then Shimades, or Tina, Dada di Jimata with that on the Debate Maris. Suzo Jimata was here. Jimata Harrison, Jimata Zumbadesina, Jimetana to 10, and the Jimetana to tell the Mihike, the Trishi that the Shaw Mamosito, or Zumba in a carre. Shawashan and Jimmy de Mayu Maris, Zuba Shawasha, so did it, so they did it. Then you shut down, something you must be Kayasira. Son, they make so the Tegajamati. Zumba in a Shawashi or Stan, Jundel de Sondo, Pumbu Karsa, Rada Masha Buno Hidre Maris.
No, so.
Yumataburis Lato. Lava, Odichari.
No, so. So we're on page 300 under the caption, How the person appears like an illusion based on that refutation. So we're continuing with that theme here. And so as Geshe said, through the 7-point analysis of the status of a self or person, we come to realize that person or self lacks intrinsic reality. Okay? That realization enables for us to see things as being like an illusion. Okay? So which means there is a paradigm shift in our perceptions, isn't it? Before we realize selfless and emptiness, how we see the things to exist. And once we realize the selfless emptiness, now how do we see the things to exist? There's a paradigmatic shift in our perceptions, right, on the things. Now things start to look like an illusion, appear like an illusion. Okay? So of course, which means when we say things appear like an illusion, that does not mean that things don't exist at all, right? The example used here is like an illusion. We did not use the example of a horn on a rabbit's head, or we do not use the example of a barren woman's child, because those are examples of non-existence, right? A barren woman cannot give birth to the child. A rabbit should not have horns. But we said like an illusion. So illusion means something that looks like something, but it isn't real, but yet it can perform functions, isn't it? So if we are at a magic show, well, a magician creates horses and elephants out of nothing. They really look like horses and elephants, you know. They perform like horses and elephants, and we develop all these feelings and reactions. I like it, I hate it. All of these things happen, although what we're seeing is not real. It's illusion, right? But it's a very functional illusion. We like it, we hate it, we don't want it to end. All these things is functioning, although that means something is there. We are not saying nothing is there. What we are saying is that these are not real horses and elephants. They appear as real horses and elephants, but they aren't real horses and elephants. That's the illusion, isn't it? But yet, these horses and elephants can generate reactions in our mind, feelings, and yiggity, all of those things, right? Just like that, once we realize selflessness and emptiness, things appear to us like an illusion. Okay? And yet, things function just the way they do. Okay? And so here, when we talk about illusion, is the example of that which is not true, right? That which is a false, right? In general, how do we say, well, that seems to be true, that's false, right? How do we distinguish between true and false? Okay? So right now, things appear to us in one way, right? Intrinsically. That looks like the truth to us at the moment because we haven't realized selflessness, isn't it? We take that to be granted as truth. But how do things really exist? They don't exist intrinsically. That is real true, which we have not accessed yet. Okay? But once we realize selflessness, emptiness, and things appear to us in one way, and we know they don't exist in that way, like it's watching the magical shows, looks like horses and elephants, they aren't real horses and elephants, yet I like them, I hate them, whatever, all these reactions happen, they function fine, okay? So that's what happens. There's a paradigmatic shift in our perspective, yet we realize that things are not non-existent. They exist, but they're like an illusion. They function like an illusion, and illusions can function fine. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? So what we're talking about is the truth from whose point of view, right? True or false? Well, in this particular case, the gold standard, so to speak, usually didn't say it, I like to say the gold standard, is the Arya's, wisdom in the state of meditative equipoise on ultimate reality emptiness. What does appear for that wisdom? Emptiness and nothing else. What is emptiness? It is a non-affirming negative phenomenon, right? It is the absence of intrinsic reality. Okay? No conventional phenomenon appear to it. So basically, things appear for that wisdom just the way it is. And that is true, isn't it? So once you realize that, and as you come out of that meditative state, how would things appear to you now? Like an illusion. See that? That's the fun part, see? That's enlightening experience.
대양 치마를 ngame 기메 통 양여라 ngama 치메 기메 통 예베 ngeba 메도 스티레 다 간제 ngama데 뎀바티셰 그래서 디 유마타우시아 디 통도 뎀바시아체 치마도 군소 아니 거 줌바인자 아니 거 남시게 디 샤와시아치 자서 간제 군소 뎀바이나 엔 뎀바 마이비 차로와 어디 샤다 ngame 통 치마를 ngame 통 여장시아 디레 뎀바 가슴이 사서 당보디 통도원지 기마타우데 가르스는 그 뎀바 가슴 데리면서 희나카요 말세죠와 그래서 군도 간가 뎀바 마르와 그래서 그 뎀바 메레고와 그다음에 통요라스 ngama 치메 기메도 ngeba 메도 시드잖아 디스거 단다 돈이 돼서 가래 줌바 기마타우 레고 말다 그 뎀바 레고와 뎀바 니체디 통도 뎀바 이스 군도 뎀바 줌바 일라고와 어디서도 자 치마를 그다 ngama 치메디 통예비 예바요 뭐 줌바 마레스 왔다 거기 네바와
라레레레 치마디
군도 뎀바디
뎀바 마레스
이모도 어디 뎀바 마르고 다 힘을 시름 뎀바 마임 차로
레레
그래서 뎀바 마르고 쳐고로
알레자다 뎀바 메세
뎀바서 어디 디 뎀바디 디레 먼저 딘중이 뎀바디 다
알레 오르레
그래서 다 군도 간가 뎀바 마임 차로
라르
치마를 ngame 뎀바 ngame 통요르스 뎀바 메바디 요르스 요로
라레레
다 ngamaला ene jumata vidnawati chia dire yeba yomor ko gacha gaso
ala ko gaso ke nangzu da ni chu kan ga thui da yomor da de yomor ba she
ba te yomor no tuba yomor ko gacha gaso re ma gi chi jumata vidnawa sha yomor o this
when I understand things clearly, it makes me so happy. So when we look at the true truths, ultimate truth, Paramartha Satya, Tandam Themba in Tibetan, and conventional truth, Samvritti Satya or Kunzop Themba. Okay? So usually when we talk about true and false, right, with regard to this true truth, which is true? Ultimate reality is true. Conventional reality is false, Zumba, isn't it? Why is conventional reality false? Because conventional reality appears one way, but it exists in another way, isn't it? Why is ultimate reality true? Because it appears as it is. Okay? There is no disparity between what is and how it appears for that wisdom in the state of equipoise, isn't it? So that's the truth, right? The false is something, what we say about, yeah, it looks like that, but it is not that. That's what false is, isn't it? It looks like that, and it is that. Well, that's the truth, right? So that's how when we look at the true truth, ultimate truth is the truth. Conventional reality is false. But conventional reality has, so to speak, the characteristic of the ultimate reality, which means it appears to exist intrinsically, but it does not exist intrinsically. Whereas ultimate reality, it does not appear as intrinsically. It appears as, what is ultimate reality? Absence of intrinsic reality. Nothing more, nothing less. That's what it is. Okay? So when we talk about Themba and Zumba, Themba truth and Zumba false, with regard to the true truth, ultimate reality is true, or the truth, and conventional reality is false. Okay?
매도서 치마티 룰루는 나만 Zumba 동방에 로인을 때네 저럽지 스타디를 가지 유마타분 접세 간서 딱 군소 쉬어도 유마타분 접세 간데 도고르세나 디스기도 가르사 룰루는 나만 Zumba 세드던 딱 간저 그게 오늘 차상 통야지 샤시 남샤지 여러 가지 몇 통야 라고스야 중거죠 말에 어 대대 로 참마티 직시 엔 데미 통이 대도 가야기 엔 로디 티니를 때네 가르세나 엔 Zumba 돼 조리에서 다 제마다
샤단 들어와로
로니일데
알레다 데르바게 가서 타nye 세마
타nye 세마 되다 동무다베 세마니를 때네
주말로 샤
제마다 차도 그래서
So the main idea here is that once we realize selflessness or emptiness of intense reality, things will appear to us like an illusion or maya, Yuma in Tibetan, right? And how is that possible? It's possible, we could say, primarily because of these two things happening. Because of what we call conventional valid perceptions and the valid perception of lack of intrinsic reality, isn't it? So because of those two perceptions, so things could appear to us like an illusion, isn't it? Well, we do have everyday valid perceptions, right? We know who is who. I know that is Latmir there, right? You know I'm Tenzin here. I mean, that's a conventional validity, isn't it? Okay? So that's how we function our life. But at the same time, if we understand the lack of intrinsic reality or the absence of intrinsic reality, so based upon those two perceptions, conventional valid perceptions and the I don't want to say ultimate valid perception, he didn't use that, but the realization of the lack of intrinsic reality, due to these two factors, things could appear like an illusion. So we will be able to experience phenomena like an illusion.
that country, Indo country is not penance. You met no make shive tongata. No, that yes, Tala meba se ye shive, nebal ten, Tala do not, the Jumam, Zumbe no, neba joy. Shendu Kansa la, soba Tanyebe, Shiva, no, the meva no. Tinny run, whatever run, he tomba, Riki, neba yel ballet, neba yin ten, Kansa Juma, Kansa, Jumam, Zumba. Zumbe no, nearby joy, Zumbe no, nearby joy, no, direct conject. Tana Miki de da, Jimetana take Tana Nango, the Yi Shiba dig, and the Kotana Maiva to Togua, to no, that Zumbanika Togua, this way. No, that Yeva, Yi shaving your 10, Tana no, Zumbam. Zumba no Yevaja, no study Michel Coratano Musum no, whenever no remado, and the Pigate Cotana Mune Marisum, some Natile or that Jumata Shadi Teresa.
So the nation that Tanya Semeki Church Tamjang and again won't be chewing in Bahakone in it. Tandam Tebenilu to a Semadi, Kujumato Chelsea.
Jumata would talk to Adi, Tonzo don't get younger. That Jeda could Shaji no Yati, Jeda Yoga, the co music, could Bega Yomara.
No, so in the middle of page 300, you find it stated there. If we are at a magic show, a magician has created these horses and elephants out of twigs and pebbles, isn't it? So we are the spectators. We're enjoying this show. We see the amazing rare horses and elephants being created, isn't it? So our visual consciousness sees them as real horses and elephants, isn't it? Right? We're enjoying the show. It's just amazing. But mentally, we know these aren't real horses and elephants, isn't it? These are just illusions created by the magician. Our visual consciousness doesn't know that. It's just enjoying, wow, beautiful horses and elephants. Oh my gosh. Right? It's fantastic. But our mind is saying, I'm at a show, and once the show is over, there are no more horses and elephants. They aren't really real, isn't it? So we know that's illusion. Right? So in the same way, our conventional valid perceptions, they see things like, the everyday thing that we experience. But once we realize emptiness of intrinsic reality, that realization of the power is just like the mental consciousness. They say, my visual consciousness, my auditory consciousness, they perceive those things, and they appear to be intrinsically existent, but they aren't intrinsically existent. That's like an illusion, isn't it? So the power of that realization of ultimate reality, it helps us to see how things are like an illusion. Okay? We don't need to do anything with our conventional valid perceptions, isn't it? Because they just function fine, normally. They access their objects validly and fine. And you are human, and you are human. There's nothing I can do about it. He didn't say that. I'm just adding more thing, right? But the fact that, that you appear like an illusion now, that is the power of that realization of ultimate reality. Okay.
Because Dilla no, you were La Rangi Daba Tiny with Semi Mindro Pay. Rangi Yemits with Rigby Shebadam. So you the tiny Lord, go with using a tea. That Jimata was a dog to Zana. Ukunigan over Jizeka and Tizorta. None to Chajik be a tiny Namja Chajira, what to the Ganga, Riki Domarwa. Domarwa. The tiny Samagora. That tiny with somebody don't do the Hakumarwa. Tondo Nilu, the Madonna Jimata of Chayo Marwa. She had the Queen Lokoran be the Karsa, Rong Heja Dobiti, Tadu Heja Casonza, and Jimata of the Queen Yinga Sogoya, the Tinderesi.
So for us to be able to see things like an illusion, those two perceptions must exist, isn't it? Conventional valid perceptions and the realization of the ultimate reality or the absence of intrinsic reality. With these two perceptions, right, then we are able to experience an illusion-like phenomenon. Okay? If we have one, not the other, it won't happen. Okay? If we don't have conventional valid perceptions, then we will not be able to understand how things function. Agent, agency, act, all of those things are conventional realities, isn't it? So conventional valid perceptions deal with those conventionalities and how we can appreciate them, their function, they exist, isn't it? But the conventional valid perceptions do not have the ability to access the absence of intrinsic reality. For that, we need the realization of the wisdom that deals with ultimate truth of the reality, isn't it? But the ultimate truth of reality does not deal with the conventionalities of things, isn't it? Because they have different jobs, right? They have different objects. Conventionalities and agency and act, those are the realms of conventional valid perceptions. What is the object of the wisdom realizing ultimate reality. So when those two things are there, then we are able to enjoy or experience that things are like an illusion, isn't it?
Oh, this is Karsa. You did the Suzo, you might candy, shut the Monday, no? You might have had the Dan Zimbe, Tanya Law, Nong Yeve, Tiki Tala, Bemu good base. Tenala Rangi, you may Jevi, Ribe Mondu, Jane, any Rangi Kibala, never Tabo Jane. Then the Nama shower, then Jumata shower, Inge. Jumata was a Tongba Loso, then a baby, the Meados. Oh dear, that says the Queen you go with Judicarsana, and the tiny with Samakona, and you on the Shajir of the Giallo, Corona, Jumata was shot away. And the Cogan, the Lotion Sugar, Kayomas, Cotton was on you, Carva, or TRH. So the college had Carasana, the Ninzo, the Demba imitation, and the Demba Bevel Tone, and the Jumata said, Shower, Jumata was shot like Lotion lost Yakayomaris.
No. So the second paragraph from the bottom on page 300, what you find stated there is that if conventional valid cognitions can see things as like an illusion, well, then there's no need for us to study, contemplate, meditate, analyze ultimate reality, because we already have them, right? We use them every day, we accessing conventional reality, but they don't, okay? So that's why we're making all these efforts to realize how things actually exist and how do they appear to exist. So that requires study and effort, isn't it? So once we realize, there is a disparity between the appearance and the way they exist, right? And that realization, along with the conventional valid perceptions, now things appear to us like an illusion, isn't it? So that's why we need both, right? Either won't do it, and of course neither won't do it at all, but mother sentient being, yeah.
What they said that the Lotion here, Carson, Chaji Jana, they are Tayaki, Chaji Namjan, Tanya Samaranga, Duya to the Lotion Shigoya, Mako, Ranshi Yoga, she said, on the station she had the Carson, in the Demba, Ranshi, Shane. In the team, Meva Tawson, ene jimata usayadi to this or
no.
tanga chokse to yagi hiba de thangbo ngonse yue garwa
Lare.
si toni to san mo chokse jimata to yamara
Lare.
what is it
No. So the bottom line is this. We already have or equipped with conventional weighted perceptions, isn't it? We don't need any training. I mean, it's just, by growth or development, we already have them, right? Nobody needed training to see, well, that's a table, right? Well, I know, duh, that's a table. I already know. What are you trying to tell me, But we need education about how that table, it appears to exist in one way and it actually exists in another way, isn't it? Now that one, without education, training, practice, we don't know, isn't it? So we know that's a table, everybody knows it. Well, we don't need any training. We just equipped with that perception. But once we know the table appears to exist intrinsically, in reality, it lacks intrinsic reality. Once we realize that requires effort, right? Now the table will appear like an illusion. Right now, it doesn't appear like an illusion. It's a table, right? Right? But that's why it is. So we need that conventional valid perception of a table that we already have, combine it with the realization of the absence of intrinsic reality of the table. Now there is a paradigm shift in our perception experience where table appears like an illusion.
what is it Kenny, Tin no sha, Dan Jimata sha, Jimata Medo, Rigbeshi, Chujin no la Jenga so Iran, number Jeva so Tongba La Nangata with Tony Towns, that Kaza Namsha Nangata with Tony said, Karsana. Rigiti Gasha Kasm, Nangati Gasha Kasm in Sura, said the Gasha Kasm dig, and Tony is not the youth humoris. Said Nagata Laris. That did the Jita Jimata said, then Ronji don't that don't start so two so yes, Leah. Any picket no one that matter was saying. Ronji don't buy no, the Ronji to what now I see still the Jimata Sura. But no. Suzai naba cha la jewata we to ni ji mo ji kheba nam somo sa se de ko nyamsha jido jumat se di jumat se di da ko na so wa ji ke jar wa na zo jo ro se da da na ga da se di ko pa ga sa ka ji mo ji me to thon do de bi rik di min da chi ya yo mo ga sa ka ji ba ro wa ta kun zo se de da pe de ye da ka do de da pe da me da shi bu jo da di jumat se me do
Again, the other Tanya Sidicalia, Yamsha, Nanga, the Betonia, the Chetup, Jumata Betoni Slab. Tony Slavin Goro. I don't know. I'm going to dinner skewed on young So at the bottom of page 300 and top of page 301, the two kind of terms that we encounter are, in Tibetan we call Nyamsha Namgata Betongi, space like emptiness in the state of meditative equipoise of emptiness. Chetup Gyumata Betongi, here translated as illusion like emptiness that appears in the post-meditational period, which means when you get out of your meditation. It's a fancy way of saying that, right? So when you are in the meditative equipoise on emptiness, what appears for your mind is the absence of intrinsic reality and nothing else, isn't it? So that absence of intrinsic reality is like a space. So that's it's called space like emptiness. Space is defined as that which is without, that lacks obstructions, right? So the non-affirmative, negative phenomenon, which the emptiness is space-like. Now once you come out of that meditative state, we call post-meditation period, now you experience the illusion-like emptiness because now things appear to you in one way, intrinsically, but you know they don't exist that way. They exist actually, empty of intrinsic reality. So you have a, illusion-like emptiness experience in the post-meditational period. Because in the case of absence of intrinsic reality, it is universal, isn't it? There is no two types of absence of reality. It's just one for one and all, right? Whoever experiences it, that's the way it is. In terms of conventional reality, it's just variety is just fantastic, isn't it? We just, it's limitless. Yeah. So in the post-meditation period, we are accessing all this variety of phenomena, all this, drama, he didn't say that. But those ramas, just fantastic, they appear to exist in one way and they exist in another way. That's why the illusion like emptiness experience come into play. Yeah.
这个提醒的效果啊的，也就是说就论就那样。我的这让也没结为别那么结呢，让一个了提也没自什么钱呢，这到了修比节目都少了，老的提硬呢，这到少，他那的呀。你像哪个都的，觉得用的东西写的，这东西写着吧，他去找这些呢。
No.
这是有这个种的查这个都过来过来那这看东西个那这看这长期说的研究小组公务员那这看起过的眼汤把我的这就这些，我的那让许多把的给考这啥呢？提我这什么些，俺写过来是吧？
So when we talk about space like emptiness, illusion like emptiness, this is like almost we're talking at a kind of macro level, like theoretical propositions, as my professors would say. It's just that. But then, how do these things apply in actual situations, right? It's like connecting the theory with the practice every day. Like, okay, that's fantastic. Space like emptiness, illusion like emptiness. What is it? Macro level thing. But how is that related to me? I'm here. So that's why now on page 301, we talk about like in our everyday practice, whatever your practice is, you are doing prostrations, you are doing circumambulations, you are chanting, you are reciting mantra, you are meditating, you are cultivating the three principal paths, right? Renunciation, bodhicitta, wisdom. In the beginning of any of our practice, they said, take a moment and reflect on the emptiness of intrinsic reality of your practice. And then, do your practice so that your practice is associated with, conjoined with, right, that understanding of lack of intrinsic reality. Okay.
我第二个是超过了说话些，你有么的提写了，你写那是他的提醒个家，觉得有么的，你家人个都全部用路用上周提，你那写上呢，你们家的那个都有过没？ thế tao chỉ đó thì chỉ mà tao tôi như sao chuyện nó liệt bắt khi bạn vô rồi tao xong rồi tao sao nó nên chỉ đó thì chỉ mà tao sai được thì thằng tôi như tôi này用过Gyeltsen rồi thì cũng không cái gì vậy đúng không? Đấy là ngay khi mà ta Gyeltsen sẽ được bao nhiêu bao ta tôi như tôi là nghe là Gyeltsen sẽ Gyeltsen muốn sẽ khi gì bao nhiêu đó ta đang đi qua nhớ ra tôi là đi Gyeltsen muốn mà sẽ cái gì nhớ ra tôi là xong rồi sẽ 어디 가장문이 시작을했어. 리베 따바나 대다 내가테 처음에 제 강사라서 봐 이민도고 냐바다 강사라서 응어는 일본어라서 왔다 동시에 탐지 동비 응어보면 운영도 좋는 최다 시험부 임베 영답에 따위 거서 시험하셔야 스티레다 가장문마서 시장에 변도 레지라나 레지도 거리가 강바르베 대진 희와 레지레데 그 다가스 각자 체매하신 강사 그런 거 써야 되나? 얘는 민두산도 다 레지 민두산 지에서 최다를说吧? 다 민두산 가르쳐서 가서 리기랑 생이 좋아 차야 어디 강사 등어서 뒷 민두산은 다 최다라고 말어. 어디래?
So we're on page 301, and so that's how those macro concepts, if I can use that word, like space like emptiness, illusion like emptiness, they should be integrated into our everyday practice. And whatever our practice is, take a moment to reflect on the lack of intrinsic reality of your practice, circumambulation, chanting, reciting, doing sadhana, meditation, whatever it is, right? So that our practice is conjoined with that kind of understanding. It's very important. So once we really understand what does space like emptiness mean and what does illusion like emptiness mean, then as we familiarize our mind more and more with these concepts through practice meditation, we will come to see that it is actually by the power or the virtue of space like emptiness in the meditative equipoise that is enabling us to be able to see illusion like emptiness in the post-meditation periods. They are very much intimately connected with each other. We will be able to experience that. So as we find it in the middle of the page 301, what it all comes down to in the beginning is, as we have stressed this over and again, it really comes to the precise identification of the object of negation we call gakcha in Tibetan. What is negated or refuted? If we are not clear with that, then all the issues that we have endlessly talked about, right? All the fallacies, all the problems, all the issues, yagadi, we never finish it. It's because of that. Because we have not been able to precisely identify the object of negation or refutation. Okay? And as Geshe explained that, let's say we are clueless about object of negation, then yet we heard something like, a person is not his head, not his arm, not his body, whatever. So we analyze it that way. Let's say there's Mr. Lejin, Okay, who's Lejin? Is this his head? His big ears, his nose, his neck, his body, his yagadi. So at the end, we don't find any part of the legend is a legend. And then we conclude what? Legend doesn't exist at all. Well, that's a nihilist position, isn't it? Why that happened? The conclusion is that legend does not exist at all is because we are clueless about the object of negation in the first place, right? That's not the analysis we are recommending anybody to do. Like, we're not saying, like, what's Tenzing? His head, his nose, his glasses. No, he didn't use it. But, then at the end you say, wow, there is no Tenzing, like he doesn't exist. Duh. Now we become nihilists. Okay? So from the beginning, if we become clear with what does intrinsic reality mean, or true existence mean, right? In some schools of thought, it's the same. True existence, intrinsic existence, characteristic existence, objective existence, existing by its own characteristics, existing from its own side, existing itself. What? We can go on, but all means the same thing, right? And if we are clear with that, now we analyze, does Tenzin exist intrinsically, truly, characteristically, from his own side, in and of himself, right? At the end of the analysis, we don't find him to exist that way. We are not saying Tenzin doesn't exist at all. What is our conclusion? Tenzin does not exist the way we thought he exists, intrinsically. So that refutation is the refutation of intrinsic reality, right? And what we have discovered is the absence of or emptiness of intrinsic reality. Are you with me so far? Okay, so that's the big difference. Yeah. So I think if you got it there with us, then nice thing to stop there today, and we welcome your questions and observations. Volume 3, page, wherever the traveling mic is, somewhere, page 301. Well, maybe you all really understood everything today. I translated, I suppose. That's fantastic. Oh, we don't have the track. Oh, sorry.
We will have one.
The man with the power behind the glasses has all the. I think it's on. Yeah, looks like.
Regarding the person, would the label person be used for an arhat dwelling in nirvana?
Say it again.
An arhat dwelling in nirvana no longer has form.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Probably.
Okay.
Not feeling.
Oh, okay.
So what's required for the label person?
Oh, okay. Sure. So you mean what's the basis for the labeling person for that arhat, right?
Yeah, would someone dwelling in
Right.
still be
Sure.
labeled a person?
Sure. Kuna kandi shwe de dire ta tini nganzo kari she de gu sidu kan ya kang sa sen ne ro gen ta sen di ko tak chwe che re ro gen 라로와다 따바 세디고 dak시스고 그러와게
네.
세디고 답변아 단다 타좀 받고 디섬게 있어와게 다 항매 타좀 봐요와게 항매 타좀 볼 수요 말와
네.
저다 딘데 항매 타좀 받라 강사게 엔타니에 따그레 말에서와 따위나 딱세 시 가르쳐도요 레스게
알레
디스노
상메 다치마세요라
라운
상메 다치마세네
다 냥델 슈데요와게
냥데 다 텔라다 알레 상메 냥데 샤디살 팅메다 저다 지나나 저 걸사 상메 다쳐 어디잖아 매 동르고라
백걸 맵 차르다
매매 차도 다도 대바스로 간가 매매 차도
노노서
마음에
저데 엔 강사 타니 주야 거요 말와
가서 가요
다 강사 라요 말와
가서요 나요 지나 냥데세 라고 다 냥데세 수익길에 제주다 제가고로 라면 냥데세 해거라 가서야 말이 다도 대바스 숨조르다
알아 타부 서르스는 테메 거선으로
다도 대바스 지로지다 선데고 라미다조도나 봉보도 간가 여러 수운도 간가 여러 체험 말이
수금이요 말마다
수운 요래
하메
수운 레뇽 그 봉보도 그게 가다 능에 되면 수분도 요 말어
알아오래
뭐지 그런데 사범에 얘기도 다 이제 가서 데려와 사범에 레다 인 말 바자 사세와 티일된 성대 수분 강가 차상 거라 야지
So Gisela, I think response to your question from looks like two perspectives. According to the perspective that there are three different vehicles or yanas, right? And for example, I think Theravadins might view this because I'm using the word Theravadin for the Tibetan translation of the Tegmen, which usually we translate as Hinayana, right? And then we have issue here, people, right? So hope it's true in the Theravadin system that once you attain nirvana, right, become arhat, according to them, you no more exist at all. So we cannot really label that as a person, right? You don't exist at all. Once you attain nirvana, right, your consciousness stops and there's no more, right? That's one issue. Now, total cessation, right? You don't exist anymore, right? But they won't say there is no nirvana. There's a nirvana exists. The person who obtained it is not there anymore, right? But according to the other perspective of where we said ultimately there's one yana in the sense. So in which case when we talk about arhat without the remainder, I know again it's not elegant in English, but who cares, right? We all know. What it really means is somebody who has attained nirvana and who has no more these contaminated aggregates of the form. Okay? But that arhat, does not have this contaminated aggregates, but has what we call uncontaminated aggregates. So those become the basis for the labeling a person, in that state. Because you have get rid of all the afflictive emotions, negative karmas, so you don't have this kind of a body of form, but you have a purified form or uncontaminated version. Yeah.
So we still have five aggregates, but they're
Right. Jadi kalau dia ke benda tadi tiap cik orang tu tanda cakap kami cakap malah ya tentang macam pumpung aja ya orang bagai. Yes, all five aggregates.
And then second, regarding emptiness, remember Geshe Gyeltsen often would say that you should only talk about emptiness as the emptiness of a particular thing, not in a general way, but only it's always the emptiness of a person or the emptiness of the table.
Okay.
But it seems to me like with the idea of space like emptiness, if you meditate on the emptiness of anything, you eventually gain the same view of emptiness, which is no matter what you look at, it's going to be the same emptiness. So what is this issue between being kind of insisting on only talking about the emptiness of an object as opposed to a more global idea that wherever you look, there's emptiness,
Okay.
it's the same emptiness.
Sure. Kurang kita tanda dia tuan ibu sih orang bagai. Tanda ngaji dia kasa nyamsan nampak tu betul ni share bagai. Jadi kalau tong ni kurang, jadi kalau seorang ko mega, orang sini tu berkap sama bagai. Jadi kalau cita ni jadi share you dengan bagai. Tong ni sing cita you orang bagai. Ina nanti ngaji kan tambah ki nampak tong ni sundu kalau kaji ni cik sijil jangan bagai. Penang ngaji ni cokce tong ni bagai. Kangsa tong ni madu ko tong ni cita ni sungguh mendu bagai. 제가 시지를 자고 내가 가서 ben에 시지기 때문에 돈이 스톱이 내려와게. 냠산 난가도 나처럼 그 돈이 직바로 와서 쳐 가릴 때 내려와게. 제가 간지 지난해 돈이 랍션도 이거도 쳐 가릴 때 돈이 있는 그 돈이 직바로 와게. 인지 민지 시지를 간에 강사기 동이 아니 가서 쪽지 동이 슬랍 거에 가르쳐고 그래서 그렇게.
네, 됐어요. 돈이 세지던데 가가요디. 너도 통마도도 희적이 되는 또 그러면 이게 다 같이 최저단에 돈이 도와요 말로 항상
이 시가르전에 개봐요 말로.
시가르는 케어 말. 대다시나 강사 땡도 손나 아니 또 라르지고로 근데 강사 땡도 손가 이제 되다. 최저 강사 이는 강사 땡도 전에 때 콜라야 뒤에는 강사 담행에 시기로 세더라. 시치면은 돈이 도와요 말다.
So emptiness, as nothing but an absence of intrinsic reality. I mean, that could be just a universal thing, right? You can find it on anything, But probably the reason why oftentimes we talk about emptiness of a person or a self is when we talk about emptiness, selflessness, we divide them into selflessness of a person and phenomena, right? So relatively speaking, it's easier to first deal with the selflessness of a person because, then phenomena is variety a lot. So that's why, to realize emptiness, I mean, whether it's a person or whatever, you have to realize it on the basis of a phenomenon. You cannot realize emptiness in a generic sense, Of all the things, you can pick and choose whatever you want, but you have to really deal with a particular example. Once you realize the emptiness of that, it's the same emptiness on anything else, Yeah.
It just seems odd because the object that you started with disappears
Right.
once you enter into the absorption. So
Right.
it didn't really matter what the object was.
Right. When this was that, 당당 가서 냠샤 남과 답에 돈이 검도 가라. 강사 된게 돈이를 검기에는 최대 돈이 가고 냠샤 남과 답에 돈이 코로나 레디오 가라. 그 메가데마도 최고 시작이요 말와. 최대 더메저를 세고도 강사 돈이 있네. 최고 돈이 있네. 강사 된게 돈이 있네. 최고 돈이 그 제발 요 말와서 가서 그 로들 샤야디 그 돈이 남과 답에 돈이 돼 마시.
됐대요. 다 통보 그 돈이 통보 그 돈이 제발시 주도자 최신지어로 최신데 가는 뒤거는 그 최신에 가서 당매다 쉐이담이 제거도.
나래.
근데 돈이 그러고 가서인데 수 돈이 지금 뭐 이제 문제가 어떻게 해야 말아.
그래, 일단 이거는 됐어. 그래서 냠샤 남과 답에 돈이 그 용외원에 때문에 내려가게. 최신의 강사 있는데 최신의 개발면도 그 최신 라르고 봐서 돈이 또 있는데.
네.
내려와. Yeah, you're right. I mean, from that experience point of view, right? Whatever you started off with, person or any other phenomenon, once you are in that space like meditative equipoise emptiness, you don't see the object. You lose it. So in that sense, it doesn't matter, what the object is. What it is, the absence of that intrinsic reality. Yeah. You have a question? Yeah.
Thank you, Geshe, for the wonderful teaching today. Very profound and deep. My question is, who or what is doing the imputation, and who or what is realizes the absence of that intrinsic existence? Yeah. Hello.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
My question is, who or what is doing the imputation, and who or what
realizes.
is it that realizes the absence of inherent existence? Is it the conventionally labeled self in both instances?
Okay, sure. Kurang kene shwe din so ke ta ta kin gan so ndi ro ba ke pena chue tham je ke tok ba tak sam re se che ro ba ke cha tak se gen di ane te chue ke be ta ru ga ba khang sa ta ke ne ka ta ngen de su re khare ke ta go re so ro ba ke dak shi je lo ta se gen che ro ba ta ngen de su ta ke ko che ba bo da ma san ro ba ke de su re ane chi wa ni ba di ane di 가서 다 랑싱 먼저버지 요러 와게 하고 이제 똥에 대 수레스 남중 먼저 타녀 대비 다 생겨 저러 와게 어디 다가라 레도 요래서 답고 땅에 대 타녀 대비 다 되지 산이 랑싱 먼저 똥에 대 타녀 대비 다 되래 수레스
네 다 그런 식으로 다 가르사 통보도 데려와 가르사
최 탐제 다다서 땅에 대
다 땅에 대 강사 인생은 되거래 똑바셔 자 그는 무슨 똑바셔로 다 뉴도 자와 강사 더 봐. 됐다. 최다부터 갔다 좀 해도 똑바로 해야지로. 강사 대야 하는 강사 스나 되지. 다 저도 동이 거지 그런 거 또도 남의 현다게 좀 말아 봐. 당고도 소소스 제시해.
No.
소소 차당저라.
Right.
어디서 또 소소 당미 또 다 당고 문이죠.
Kena ta tonge danda kendi kangsa sene to kwa senge de ngazo thanye de be kangsa shan de go so ta dong de ro wa.
어디지?
Ta in kangsa de chidang kangsa senge je ta ge be ke je man so de sha go ro.
어디지?
Danda ngazo gen thanye to kwa ta se de ro wa bena. Chidang to kwa je be de ta ma je tin jin do je to kwa ta senge ro wa ge. Kangsa tin jin do je ta de ku go ka go.
됐다. 똑바로 딱도 시지도 소소 저거데 캐요마. 똑바로 딱좀 세야 돼. 수 딱는 되게 강사. 추어커를 tum지로 똑바로 거 요즘 싶어서 이거 땅이
Ale.
너희는 이야요 말아. 캐스요 말이고.
No no so. Ale se ta thanye de be ta de che do ro wa tong. Yes, I mean the short answer is it's the conventional eye of the self or the person, who is doing the labeling imputation and who finally realized the absence of intrinsic reality. But in the in the text we also talk about how things are merely imputed by terms and concepts, right? The concept means conceptual thought processes, So I said, is there a universal person out there who's doing that, or is it me, the Tenzin, who's doing it? He said, yeah, it doesn't matter whoever that person is, right, doing the labeling imputation, because basically what we're saying is that nothing exists from its own side, right? Somebody is labeling onto it, right? And then, that's why things couldn't be intrinsically existent, right? So it's the conventional self, yeah. Okay, yeah. Any other thoughts? Let me, yeah.
So Geshe said that at the very end that the difficulty is to identify the object of negation. And now, why doesn't Gyeltsen Rinpoche give this kind of meditative exercise where one imagines that they're in situations that are embarrassing or falsely accused and things like that in order to evoke the image of that?
Right.
That's the first part of this. And then there's the Pabonka Rinpoche who talks about that. This is the way to identify the object of negation. But then he ends up in his presentation saying that, and he's not the only one, that the image to be negated is none other than the very way in which entities normally present themselves to our mind. So basically, do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, so on the one hand, there is this meditative exercise where we imagine that and try to evoke the image of intrinsically existent self. But on the other hand, the intrinsically existent self of persons and phenomena is none other than the way entities present themselves naturally to our mind. So.
Oh, okay.
So there is
okay. So how do we sort of
and he's not the only one saying it. Of course, Phuntsok in Gyeltsen, he quotes that. Ronpo Dorje, Chanke Ronpo Dorje, and Norsen Gyeltsen.
It's as if things appear in that way to us, right? We don't have to do anything.
No.
Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay.
What he's saying is that the object of negation is the way things normally appear to our mind.
Yes.
That's all there is. It's not that they appear intrinsically. This is what that means. What he's saying is the object of negation is this table, you, I, and everything else. That passes and of course, Gyeltsen Ronpo Dorje said the same thing, and others.
Right.
Do you understand?
Yes, and I understood what you said is that, the object of negation is how things appear to us, right? We don't have to qualify it with intrinsic reality, right? That's what I'm saying, right?
Yes, it's none other.
None other.
There's no need for a meditative exercise where you can try to evoke it. Right. You don't need to analyze it.
Okay, right.
This is when you analyze whatever appears to your mind.
Okay. So now your question is, I understood that.
There's the contradiction between the necessity for actively identifying either through the explanation of Gyeltsen Rinpoche or through the meditative exercise of Pabonka Rinpoche.
Okay. Yeah. Now I understood. Kona kan di shwe di siwol ke. Ta tanda nganzo de zo nega da kar tsu kan liya gakja ngunji sebu che ko de res ngor wa ge. Ta tyon tuna ro wa ge. So ta gakja ngunji che ta de liya pena da karso gore pena 각종 nguyên 제가 탑라 pena 파본 거를 뭐 제대로 소매 pena 가서 남주께 소소소지 가서 그래 pena 가서 남주 시부지 가자보다 로하게 교자보다 두자보다 근데 내가 답이나 안 각종 nguyên 직 새로 연구를 해서 로하게 제가 각종 nguyên 제가 탑람을 스팅겨 로하게 뭐 사부로보다 카팅 붙여나 아니 코치하다 직 쓰고 와 그냥 초진의 스튜디오 가는 남주 제는 무슨 거잖아 각종 nguyên 각자 단다가 최탐제 만sol에 얘기한 각자 세 개로 와 지단에 최고랑 만sol이야 낭당 다가나래 맞아 저 딜러 로스 가서 생긴 세게 요 말씀 모르게 시대가나 안디니 보러 결다를 수도 봐 최고는 지당 가서 낭어 다가라 로스 가서 매베 내려 봐게 세 국이 매버서 관 다가라 봐게 양 초지는 가서 등에 제 탑줄래 아니 지 카경부 중보다 워사부 중보다 디데 삼로 당외나 안 가서 문제 야부 투고 사죠 봐게 이번 그 결다를 통고 있어 봐 그래서 디 칸데 세고 쓰고 그러게 괜찮은 세부치
알레 나도 나야 다가나 가자 인데 사기 좀 하다 나야 디샤라다 걸사
빨리 가서 남주 테이블에 나버 와게 남주 다가나 내 로스 가서 세고요 말 그랑 시르번에 가 나버 에스 다가나
디스고 다 간제 디스고 말에 간다 농주 좀 런시 트베 켜와지 나도지 런시 마저 켜와지 나도지 강 켜와 마저 나도 숨이 있어 나도 뭐 지도 대용 거다 다로 슉슉도 zan다 대도 비 가야 켜와 마시버서야 다 거니 그런 남기고 세워봐 다 디데야 디디 슉슉으로 가데다 런시 트베 켜와지 나거와 다 로지 뭐를 켜와서야 되는 간절 나고 말이야 돈이 또 산다서 여봐라 다 간절 님이나 여봐라 어때
런치르바 낭주지다 런치르바 마 가자 마 켜봐 마지막 낭주지 뭐시요 말서 다
님이셔 뭐 저도 섬지 제 낭주 섬지 낭주지 돈이 뭐도 이들 가져서 니여서
So I checked this I make it very clear in what said. He said, with regard to how they said, how table and everything appears to us, right? There's nothing beyond that to look for the intrinsic reality, right? That's what we're missing right here. So Geshe said, he's not so sure about that, because he said, I often said there are three ways things could appear, right? One is, for us ordinary beings, things could appear as being intrinsically existent, right? That's when our grasping at intrinsic reality is very strong. There are other moments where things even don't appear to us as intrinsically existent. It's just like without that qualification, isn't it? Then the third possibility is that things appear to us as being empty of intrinsic reality. That doesn't happen to us until we realize emptiness. So he goes more with those three possibilities. So he's not right. Said, just to say that the way things appear to us, that itself is intrinsic reality, and beyond that we don't have to search for. He little bit disagrees with that.
But does that mean he disagrees with? If I understand correctly, so that's also implied in my question. Am I understanding correctly what Gyeltsen Rolpe Dorje is saying, and Dharma Vajra, I think, was for Lawson Choki Gyeltsen, that what they're saying, that what we negate is what appears to us.
Right.
Are they at least, so is he disagreeing with that,
right, yeah.
if that's what they're saying?
관한소를 랑신기 취지 나한테 여러와게 내가 로스 랑신도 가요 마서 디 관한소 송에 다 거래 하고 저러와게 돈다 딱딱 고대를 거요 말했어 다디 최단장 간저 낭바 다가나러와게 고 랑신도 낭데 내가 로스 랑신도 세게 요말 숨고 있어와 디 가고레스 가위너와게 디 송대디 코네 디레를 스코서 디 고단데 고와 디 딱딱 대대요래 이 세죠
디 제도 대다 그 해당될 때는 십자 좀 신이 해야지 고아라부터 해야지 여러와 고아 라베토 좀 해외나 이거 다 배는 pombar 나와 다가라 디럽 나와레스 나는 디고래 난거라 나도 난거라
나래
그러와
나래
세나가 나지가 베게 데로레서는 디고 말이야 데로 많이 만나요
No, Geshe said, where they said it, because there are different ways of presenting the teaching, right? But if we kind of don't want to go into sort of more specific things, in a generic statement, you can say that, the way things appear to you, the way West, that's what intrinsic reality is. There's nothing more, right? We can say that. But then if we go a little bit more, as Geshe said, then there are those variations he talked about, right? Things could appear sometimes intrinsic, sometimes not necessarily, so all those things come up. Yeah. Good. Any other? Behind you.
What the section do the Chidon Dishina. That this is a tree shed, the Kadi Shena, and the Kapto Korak was in here. Young Kapto Kajan, the young Dishakaji here, she did that moment yours. Until I did it, Shana.
No, son.
And very over. What did it? I love it to the Shivja humors to the Koakan and degree. It's just humorous. That Tazat saying that Shivja show. That because she 他这动那个不他吧，快就是这些现在设计的项目个下个了啊。
나네.
我的老们这个的夸做修是真的，别是非常夸着了，刚才写下个是吧？是不是行嘛的？
나네. So Geshe also wants to take this opportunity to say that, how pedagogically speaking, lamas, they present their teaching, depending upon public teaching or whatever, right? So sometimes they can make that kind of a, more based upon kind of to provide some kind of conceptual understanding, they present it one way. But then, in other cases, they might go into very details, So the Lamrim is one of those, it goes more like a general sense, doesn't go too much into specifics, But like the monks at the debate, right? Now they will debate about every little minutia thing, And so the advantage is when you go through all the refinement, finally, then you are able to see, right, understand things more clearly. But then that can be very complicated, right? If we kind of mix what the monks are doing in the debate courtyard with what the general teaching presentation, there can be so much confusion and headache, now what is happening, So we want to keep those things right in our mind. Yes, Kiko.
Thank you. Could you explain difference between dependent origination and dependent designation?
Okay. Mona candidate should again. Tandang the 10 days says your work, 10 chuma says your work, 10 chuma says, 10 tapa says your work. Then you get out with the country again.
电的情况的，电的大把才能打，直到电这下去了，这里他，可是人把这什么时候的？电这是的，但那甚至我们的电这是的，原来人不情况是的这个，那些嘛电的想法是吧？他的那样，容易把这现在咱那样电下来的，那些当初是呀，这我电这个些，样电这些想法是吧？他的那。 태교가 계시는 또배 담아서 된데서야지 겨울아. 그때 좀 섬들 시작했어.
걘 덕치 덕쳐게 된데서
덕치 덕치스 됐어.
알라로 니 소샤.
어디래? 그 덕치면 다가 면 갖다서면 덕치 용배 건가 지어라 와. 어디 덕치.
타이네겐 제단 고데 텐준스네레 텐에 따바스네레 가르쳐 그래 배나 저 텐주부 룩자면은 걔고 돈다치고 밥으로 밥사로 게.
다 지도제 텐주 해야 돼 차는 저다.
나로마.
그러와. 시스템도 보면 이제 늦게 유연을 된 지금 중간에 되는 식으로 와.
나래.
다 틀려 로지 해야 돼야 백회이 계주로 해도 따라지 가르치는 대화도 지금 뭐도 그 하나면 이제 다시 지금 작으로 와.
나래.
다 태교에서 따뜻해 처음 유일 받아 마셔지 강가 똑배 받아 해오시 된대죠 와.
된대들 텐주 랍셔고
된대들.
Okay, so the Tibetan term for dependent origination is tenjung, okay? Something that originates dependently. And the dependent designation is tenetapa, okay? And so what is the difference between these two? Is the question, right? As Geshe tried to explain that, often we talk about the three ways to understand dependent arising concept, right? Tendel, sorry. And according to, like, say, mind-only school, Chitamatrins, they talk about dependent arising or origination only limiting to cause and effect relationship. Right? Things which are produced, they can talk about dependent origination. Things which are unproduced, they can't talk about it. Right? That's their limitation. Then we go to Sevatandika Madhyamika school. They talk about the dependent designation between the, there has to be something intrinsically there as a basis. Then you can designate something onto it. Right? So they will talk about that kind of a dependent designation. If something doesn't exist intrinsically, there's nothing to designate anything, right? That's their position. Okay? So then we go to the Prasangika Madhyamika, the highest level. They say, ultimately everything is merely label, right? There's nothing there from its own side, So that is the subtlest interpretation of what dependent designation means, So it depends upon the philosophical standpoint, what it is. So from Prasangika's point of view, that is what dependent arising means ultimately, right? Merely label. So that is also dependent origination. That's also dependent designation. So it's been the same thing. Yeah. Any other thoughts? So we'll stop there today. It's 12:30. Before I forget, I think last time I forgot. announcement. Those who are on I think the group list, you already know about it. This coming Wednesday, 31st, Halloween Day, is also our auspicious day, Buddha's descent from Tushita to the human world. So we will celebrate it with Tsok offering, which we make it public and open. So it's 7:30. So you're welcome to participate in it. Bring your fruits and to be blessed and share. Then I heard that the Friday is our regular Tsok, right? People who do Tsok, right? So anyway. And then next Sunday again, I think I will be in DC. So we'll go back to calm abiding, and then when I return, we'll pick up, where we left off today. Kange londe demye tende nyenda namda rabsebe chenye dungun chishin seje nyeje tuga lebom kanda sebe zura mare pendon dongen jese rozo kunla boje daze yanla tuju yangzen son ruda shedro nyemo leye changdo zhe chen mare munze dongen nyogo chenye chunze rade nam dene daje saju yunzen lunzo Geshe tuwe gu chuja chuda chunyi talu mus jambe yang la du omara bazana de Omara bazana de zenden köye kera veze ye talu temo mimba rapsene kada tenju Pawe nawan zendo se lode kyazi vijun pega de kesan pongwe chudo mimba shen tenpa zinla wanto kishu chanyin shu chola so wa. Please start with Manjushri. 长住身着人不知，马也不能也有知，也我娘我没我养，公灵。有多年到我人不知，马也不能也有知，也我娘我没我养，公灵公。别我有杀心，别见诸心没多少，热热灵气念的眼光的，上夜心多灭的为我眼中会难大心，绝不。有刚热热为过为心刚的，偏当的我们的中为呢。今日是王定定要作业，下边谁的把天有节，一当古如让那满的老，你要那要。